Hi, and welcome to the third part of our 2,000-mile French road trip in an EV, a journey to Sisteron, the gateway to Provence. In part 1 we headed from home to Provence, in part 2 we headed from Provence to Semur-en-Auxois. In this part, as I said, we're heading to Sisteron, one of the longest legs of this journey at 294 miles, and the last time we use the Autoroute network until we leave Le Mans for home. There's a long Autoroutes section. I'll be recapping the tips and hints I mentioned in the last video, plus finishing up with the next 3 tools I use for planning a trip. I'll also include possible sources for inspiration that we use, so if that interests you, why not subscribe and hit that notification bell. Anyway, without further ado, let's make our way out of the wonderful Semur-en-Auxois. And don't let the grey skies fool you, we've had a wonderful time here. I'll pop the video of Semur up at the end. A special mention goes to the Le Semur restaurant we ate at last night and the Hotel de la Côte d'Or. We managed to charge there, although being asked how many kilowatt hours was unexpected, and not wishing to pay for more than we needed means we leave here with around 96% state of charge. We have a sort of rule. If we can grab a charge at our accommodation, we'll take a breakfast there. Else we'll search somewhere out en route with the facilities so we can charge while we eat. As today's a long journey, we've headed out just after 8, and it's a damp Thursday in early September. It's now just a short hop of 9 kilometres or 5.5 miles to the A6 to Lyon. We pick up our ticket at the Péage Bière-le-Semur before hitting the Autoroute. You probably already know this, but France has variable speed limits for their autoroutes. In good conditions it's 130 km per hour or around 80 miles per hour for cars. This drops to 110, 68 miles per hour in wet weather, and it's certainly wet in my eyes. There are different limits if you're towing a caravan, driving a motorhome, etc. I'll drop a link in the description to the RAC website with the details for driving in France. It also covers the need to carry high-vis jackets in the car. In fact, anything I mention, I'll drop a link in the description if appropriate. Now, let's return to planning this trip. In the last episode I mentioned starting with a spreadsheet, Microsoft Excel for me, then Google My Maps as a way to pin places of interest, to add accommodation, record routes and a lot more. Via Michelin to plot routes and provide inspiration for stopovers, etc. We'll also give you options for reducing the toll cost, but that comes with slower speeds along D and N roads and generally a lot more stop-start. Great if you have the time, but for these longer days it has to be the Autoroute. Another way to understand Autoroute costs is the SANEF website, but you do need to know the entry and exit points of your Autoroute journey, so I prefer the Via Michelin option. AI is also an option, but the results are generally indicative, and Via Michelin is much easier. Where I would say AI can be helpful is on the more scenic routes, where you can create a prompt that fits your needs, asking for lunch suggestions, stopovers, etc. etc. As always, check the response because it can come up with some interesting results at times. Now, how do you source your inspiration? For us it's a mix of blog posts, social media channels, TV shows, past visits and recommendations. You already know this, but one word of warning on social media. The other day I saw a video I sort of recognised. It was on the village of Ordor-sur-Glane, the scene of the massacre by SS troops in 1944. The old village has been left as a memorial, and we'll visit it later in this trip as we travel between Bergerac and Poitiers. Hopefully you're subscribed so you don't miss that. Anyway, the video was clearly AI generated and did not look like the place we visited. And as you know, images posted can show just one perspective of a location. So we tend to utilise more recognised resources, and 2 we are fond of are the UNESCO World Heritage List and Les Plus Beaux Villages of France, or in English, the most beautiful villages of France. On this trip our first stop of Provence was UNESCO recognised, as well as Albi, which we'll visit in a week's time. Les Beaux Villages is an extensive list, so this is where pinning them somewhere like My Maps makes sense. And when you plot a route, see if it takes you close to any of the villages. Do you have a preferred method of scouting out your French locations? I'd love to hear about them. Leave us a comment below with the details, unless it's a secret, of course. Let me tell you about the next tool, and it's not a secret. It's ABRP, or a better route planner, and it's an electric car specific tool. So if you're a die-hard combustion fan, you can jump forward if you want. The section markers are there in the description, or you can follow along with some more rain on the Autoroute. Okay, you're still with me? ABRP is a web and app tool. There's a free version, but I have the paid version as it offers better car integration. There's also a version that runs on the Android automotive system in the car and can provide real-time state of charge information. In simple terms, ABRP is a routing tool that provides you with charging recommendation, but that's really underselling it, and strictly speaking, you don't need it. However, let me explain how I use it and you may understand why it's part of my toolkit. I create individual legs for this trip and use a naming convention that makes it easy to organise. For this trip it's FRT 24-day number, close brackets, start location to end destination, or maybe something like Provence road trip. The key is the unique identifier and the day number, and I may have an A, B or C after the day number. I'll explain why in a moment. Currently in the system I have the Scottish road trip for later this year, our German Christmas markets starting in November, and next year's French road trip. Plus I've yet to archive this year's French trip. There are a number of things that set ABRP apart, and let's start in the settings. You can add your own car with some reference consumption, or take the defaults, then add your charging requirements. Does it work with your particular charge card? We use the Electroverse card, part of the Octopus group, that covers a huge amount of providers. Chargers that you may want to exclude, for example ones you've had issues with. I could not get the Aziva chargers at McDonald's to work. I like the idea of them because they were quick and normally in densely populated areas. Not actually for the McDonald's, you understand. After a couple of failed attempts at different locations, I gave up on them. You can also set the minimum number of charger stalls. The more there are, the more likely you are to find a free one. Plus there's the maximum charger limit you want to charge to. Then there's facilities like restrooms, trailer friendly, dog friendly and family friendly. You can then define the minimum arrival charge at the charger and your destination. Then you have your routing preferences, where you can tweak your charge stops between optimal, fewer and fewest. The latter two options normally mean longer at the charger, so I stick with optimal. Then the usual avoid en route, tolls, motorways, ferries and borders. This is where I have a little bugbear. I may want to mix and match between stopovers on a route. Like yesterday when I wanted to jump on a rapid charge that happened to be on an Autoroute, and then jump straight off when you've done that for a scenic route. However, there is no routing software that allows you to do that, to the best of my knowledge. Feel free to correct me if you know of a solution that does. This is why there can be A, B or C elements to a day's route in the naming convention. Then back to ABRP. You can turn on real-time traffic and adjust speed. This allows you to reduce your speed to get to your charge stop or destination within the charge limit. That's not for me. You can also factor in weather, either real-time, seasonal or manual. Normally those settings remain static if you're just using it for planning as I am. Just change the route options where needed. Now, just a quick break whilst we pay our toll on the A6. We're just north of the city of Lyon, the third largest in France. One interesting fact, it's home to Interpol. Anyway, we're going to skirt around it and leave the A6 to join the A46. As you have seen, this has not been the most exciting drive. I think you can appreciate my comments in the last leg that the Autoroute is a great way to cover distance, but boy can it be dull. And the rain certainly hasn't helped. So after a couple of hours in the saddle, I've decided it's time for a comfort break. So I select an hour with charging facilities. I've opted for one with Ionity chargers because I always find them reliable. Strictly speaking, I don't need a charge, but consumption has been a little higher due to the rain. I'll cover a little bit about consumption later. The main reason for the stop is, well, the restrooms. So we'll grab a pastry and in 43 minutes we'll pour 44.49 kilowatt hours at a cost of £21.13. Now 43 minutes is a long time and I have made an EV schoolboy error. I've charged past 80%. Let me explain as we get rolling again. In most EVs the rate of charging drops off after 80%. And therefore it takes longer to try and fill that last 20%. The ideal is to charge from 20 to 50%. This will be the quickest option, but you will be charging more often. I have to be honest, I was still a new boy at this, and there were some nerves, but don't tell Janice. Anyway, we have plenty of charge to get us to Sisteron, but I do have another stop planned at the edge of Sisteron to prepare for the following day's drive to Antibes. I guess nobody noticed, but we switched Autoroutes again, and we're now on the A432, and we have another toll to pay. This is the cost of bypassing Lyon on our way to Grenoble. It's only a relatively short journey of 25 miles as we pass Lyon Airport and join the A43, before we reach the next toll gates to pick up a ticket. The following stretch of autoroute will take us on towards Grenoble. But before we get there, let's finish up ABRP. Earlier we covered the default settings. Now start planning your route by entering your state of charge. Leaving home I normally start with 100%, and then if I know I'm going to get a charge at a hotel, I also start with 100%. Else I carry over from the previous day's destination state of charge. As well as being able to add stopovers, you can add waypoints, which I love. Tomorrow, I want to drive a particular section of the D2. I don't want a stopover, I want a waypoint. It will calculate a charge at both your stopovers and your destination. For the departure, you can enter a date and time. This feeds the seasonal weather information of the routing, and then you can add an amenity to the route plan, such as lunch or a coffee stop, and set the duration. When you set a stopover, you have the option to search for chargers around that location. You can then plan your route. There's an option to select alternatives, with 3 being the default, but you can ask for more. You can save the plan. This is where your naming convention comes in. Unfortunately, there's not a folder system, so I can't group my current road trips, but that's not a massive problem. Then finally, for now, I can share the plan. There are many options, but I can add it to a calendar, open in Google or Apple Maps, create a shareable link, or my favourite, share it to an Excel file format. You know how much I love Excel. Okay, it's now time to pay the next toll, and you've probably now begun to appreciate the cost of using France's Autoroute network. For the whole of this road trip through France, which totaled 2,277 miles, the total came in at £108.20, but a good chunk of that was on D roads. Our 2025 trip was £60.54, and our 2026 trip £154.37. Each of them different experiences, and it's your choice of how you explore France. And you can tell I love a spreadsheet. Okay, we're now on a toll-free section of the A480 as we approach Grenoble, and you'll notice the volume of traffic has increased. It's probably time to talk about the Critère. It's France's emission badge, and many towns and cities require one if you want to drive into their low emission zones, Grenoble being one of them. Now, I don't believe that driving on the autoroute in a normal day requires one. However, on high emission days there may be some restriction, and I've struggled to find a conclusive answer on the web either. This is the only city on this trip that requires one to enter the heart, and we're not. However, I would recommend that you get one because they're relatively cheap at around £5, and they cover the life of the car registration. If you plan to visit France in your own car, they make sense. I'll pop the link to the official French government website where you can order them from. Beware of scam websites out there. Only order them through the French government site. And don't think you can pick one up when you're in France. You need to order them in advance. And if you get caught in a place where you need one, there are some reasonable fines for non-compliance. Now, you probably noticed once past Grenoble the traffic has thinned out. The landscape is more impressive and the rain looks to have eased a little. We've passed through a mountain or two and about to pay our last toll of the day. Now, I just said the weather has improved, and guess what? I was wrong. However, here's a fact. When I think back on this trip and this day, I don't think about the journey. Oh yes, it was a long one, but that was planned. I really only think about arriving at Sisteron and exploring the town, which we'll get to later. Something else the plan told us was we would get to a point where the autoroute ended and the last 60 miles would be on single lane D roads. But that's okay, the end's in sight. We'll soon be picking up the D1075 and this will deliver us almost all the way to Sisteron. And whilst you enjoy this section of the route, let me tell you about our next tool, Microsoft OneNote. As I may have mentioned, I use Microsoft Excel a lot. I have access to that through the Office 365 suite of programs, which includes Microsoft OneNote. The main reason we use it is because it allows Janice and I to collaborate effectively. It's central to so many things we create as part of our work for you. As well as a desktop app, there's a mobile app, a web portal, all synced automatically. For trip planning, we start with a section group for the year, with all our high-level trip names, and then for each of those trips, a section for the specific one, and then within that, a collection of pages. These pages represent all aspects of planning, for the details of the accommodation. If the car park is not on the same street as the hotel, I include what 3 words for the location. And then we have a page for road route and a page for the destination. I generally take care of the road routes and Janice the destination. And then we review everything together and then argue about it. We have checklists within OneNote that get recycled for each trip. Different ones for UK road trips, European road trips and trips where we fly. The great thing is it allows you to organise things easily whilst working on them simultaneously. I think that must have earned my gold star nerd badge now. Let's talk about the route for a moment. As you can see, there's still a heavy mist in the air. You can tell I'm English because I love talking about the weather. Anyway, even on this edited down version of the journey, you can appreciate my earlier comment regarding being at the mercy of the slowest moving vehicles. And sometimes they're not that slow on the straights, just in the corners. I like to dispatch them when I can safely do so. Not sure all other road users have the same standards. It's not that they're that slow, it just means that when I come to a much slower vehicle, I'm hopefully not too far back in the chain. Our Polestar 2, which is a long-range dual motor, has 4-wheel drive. That combined with the explosive delivery of electric power means overtaking is relatively easy, another benefit to an EV. Anyway, back to planning, and the next tool in the box is AI. And I have to be honest, it wasn't used for this trip, but it has become part of the arsenal for recent trips. Everything from picking scenic roads, places to visit en route and at a destination, places to eat and drink. I still have to add the caveat that you do need to validate its response. On our 2025 tour, we used it to try and source places to eat or drink. I mentioned that in the last video, but sometimes it can be a challenge, especially on Sundays and Mondays in smaller locations, if you want to eat local. But one thing we discovered was, on more than one occasion, that businesses had ceased trading or had different owners and different menus. The correct responses were pasted into OneNote pages and pinned onto a fresh layer in our My Maps page. One thing to bear in mind is that there's a limit of 10 layers in My Maps. You have to consider that while using it. We do create projects in ChatGPT for each tour and individual chats under that. However, I still prefer OneNote and My Maps as my primary sources, but that's just a personal thing. For the record, this has all been shot on a DJI Osmo Action. It has been our stalwart since 2021 and only replaced earlier this year. It's still working, but I wanted the much updated, much improved Osmo Action 6. Anyway, I mention it because it's normally very reliable, However, on this leg it stopped recording. Fortunately, we travelled the same route this year, so see if you can spot the difference. Okay, it was captured in June during France's heatwave, but there's another difference for you to spot a little later. So back to a point I mentioned earlier, consumption, and with that range, normally a good pub debate. Anyway, there is a standardised test, WLTP, and that's based on the consumption at 28.8 miles per hour. That is then times by the battery's capacity to give you a range. The problem is that these are lab figures and they're rarely achievable in the real world, and the variances can be quite large. So the quoted figure for the range of our Polestar, which sits on 20-inch wheels, and yes, that does make a difference, is around 350 miles. However, in reality, when the speed ramps up to 70 miles per hour and the rain, everything goes south. Let me give you some real world numbers and how I source them. The Polestar 2 has an app, the Journey Log, that can be used to record trips. It records the start and stop time, location of both, distance between them, consumption in kilowatt hours, and the start and end odometer readings. That's because it does have the occasional habit of missing a leg. It captures each leg when you exit the car. So with that data available, the drive to the first charging point was 135 miles at an average speed of 61.6 miles per hour, and you used 44.3 kilowatt hours. The car's battery has a usable capacity of 79 kilowatt hours, so that represents 56% consumption. But a figure that makes more sense is miles per kilowatt hour, and for that stint it was 3.1. On the leg from the first charge to the second, that improved to 3.3 for the 155 miles covered. The average speed dropped to 47.6, so our range based on the day's consumption would be 255 miles. Now tomorrow, with no Autoroutes, jumps to 3.9 miles per kilowatt hour, giving us an indicated range of 309 miles, and that's with some reasonably hilly terrain. Hopefully you're subscribed so you won't miss that. Anyway, if we top up now, we won't need to charge tomorrow, so let's get charging. We're arriving at a bank of Ionity chargers at a Super U hypermarket to check out the hypermarket for some goodies on our to buy list and maybe a snack. We're only here for 27 minutes and draw 40.57 kilowatt hours at a cost of $19.26. That's plenty for tomorrow's journey, so let's head on to our accommodation. And did you spot the difference? Yep, the Burger King was new for 2026. Anyway, let's talk about inspiration. Why Sisteron? Well, it featured in the Polestar 2 advert, along with a section of the D2, which we'll catch on the next leg. And when you see the Rocher de la Baume, you may understand why we had to visit. But there's much more to this pretty little town, the gateway to Provence. Let me show you. Of course, don't miss our full video of Sisteron, which will pop up at the end, as well as Semur, which we left this morning. That seems a long time ago. There's also a playlist of the whole trip for you to dive into. So it seems a good time to say au revoir. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it and some of it's been useful. Until next time, happy and safe travels.